Hi, I'm Ken Heyman. As Managing Director of the Advisor Institute at AllianceBernstein, I meet with financial advisors every day. One thing I hear expressed over and over is their frustration with how much they are juggling. The advisors I talk to are constantly trying to balance competing priorities, from managing client relationships to prospecting for new business, and of course, the tasks of leading their team. This problem of juggling is why we created the AllianceBernstein Digital Coach. This is a proprietary tool that draws on the wisdom of behavioral economics and unique perspectives from the Advisor Institute's practice management experts. In less than 10 minutes with the Digital Coach, you will be able to identify and prioritize the top needs of your practice. And armed with those insights, you will be well on your way to tackling the challenge of limited resources while positioning your business to seize opportunities for growth. Let the Digital Coach guide your journey to success. Visit abfunds.com/go/digital coach. That's abfunds.com/go/digital coach. Welcome to Secrets of Successful Advisors. I'm Ken Heyman, the host of our program, and today I'm going to be continuing a conversation with my friend and colleague, Alex Kirby from Total Family. We're going to explore a little bit about the ecosystem that's beginning to develop around the issue of legacy for uniquely successful families. Please join us for a fast-paced and I think very interesting conversation. Welcome to Secrets of Successful Advisors with Ken Heyman. I'm Ken Heyman. We're changing things up again today, and we're going to do an interview with my friend and colleague, Alex Kirby of Total Family, second in a series of conversations where we're exploring this whole idea of legacy. Alex, thanks for joining us again today.
Thank you, Ken, for helping us talk about legacy, get it out to more people.
That's a great place to start, the way you frame that, because as we discussed in our first conversation, the whole issue of legacy and legacy visioning for families is not a widely understood or even practiced kind of consultation for advisors to do with their clients. And yet, as we have discussed, it's quite central to the needs of families who have achieved high levels of success. What I'm observing, having been introduced to this whole process from your work at Total Family, is there's a complex ecosystem starting to evolve around this issue of legacy to support families and advisors working with families. And I thought today it might be really interesting to explore the details of that ecosystem and kind of make sense of how legacy is done at various levels of detail and complexity with families. Could you kind of walk us into the vision you've had of that and how Total Family fits in?
Legacy work, as you said, and I know the audience here is ultra high net worth. Legacy work has largely been done at the ultra high net worth level for the last number of decades with great success. All of the thought leaders, all of the ideas that really are related to legacy are applicable to ultra high net worth families, and that's where the work has been done. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those are the only families that can benefit from legacy work. And just like a lot of things, and I don't know if this is the best example, Ken, I'm always like trying to think of analogies for this type of stuff, but power windows, when they came to cars for the first time, the nicest cars got power windows and everyone loved it. They're like, this is unbelievable. We don't have to do the crank anymore. And the reason that everyone didn't have power windows wasn't because they couldn't benefit from power windows and they weren't better. It was simply because it was expensive to deliver this early on. And as technology gets more involved and innovation starts to take place, it drives the cost down so that more people can adopt things. And so now we all have power windows. And so this type of legacy work, I think it's very natural that it started at the ultra high net worth level and it's making its way down. And by the way, there's still other innovations happening at the ultra high net worth level. So by the time everyone gets power windows, the nicest cars have moved on to something else. And it's just kind of a recurring cycle. So it starts there. That's where we learn about legacy in a lot lot of ways. And then we figure out how to bring it down to more people.
So let's cut into that a little bit more and make some clarity, because my interest in featuring these conversations on Secrets of Successful Advisors is that I have come to believe that working around legacy issues and some of the components that feed into the creation of legacy for a family really will benefit a lot of the clients of the advisors we're working with. And I think the mythology that I observe right now, and this comes from my travels last week with clients that I was working with in a face-to-face setting, that the vision is, oh, there's this very specialized team that is located in the home office that deploys to, ultra high net worth families that have, hundreds of millions of dollars, very expensive, very bespoke, very, high touch, very human driven, specialist driven kind of service. And that certainly exists, but there are other pieces of that ecosystem that are bringing this same experience down with a less of that high touch, bespoke, expensive process. So it would be interesting to me if you could kind of pull apart where it started, what that high level is, and then kind of relate us down to what's available at the lower levels that advisors in general can take advantage of in their own practice.
Those experts that you're referring to are typically what we consider to be in that level 3. There's 3 levels, so I'll kind of do them at a high level and then we can dive in if that's all right. Level 1 is work that we consider to be client-led. So this is all legacy work. Level 1 legacy work is client-led, meaning it can be done in a software like Total Family created, but it can also be done in a notebook. It can be done in whatever resources the family is currently comfortable using. The big part of it being it's the family doing the work. If a client wants to write a letter to their child, or they want to capture key milestones in their life, or they want to do some version of genealogy or whatever, we don't need anyone else there to do it. It's a way for clients to self-select. And I think a lot of times when we hear advisors have any type of hesitancy with legacy work, it's like they already have so much going on. They already have so much on their plate. How could they possibly do this? Well, at level 1, the advisor isn't responsible for anything, because I don't think an advisor should do more work to uncover a client's values than the client is willing to do. So I think also at level 1, we see clients self-selecting. You and I know that not every client is into this legacy work. That's just the fact of the matter. So if a client doesn't want to do it, that's great that they self-selected out. If they do want to do it, then they can do level 1 work. So level 1 is client-led. Level 2 is the advisor integrating it. And if you think about what we're asking the advisors to do, if we ask them to do all the level 1 work, that is hours and hours and hours per client. It's not sustainable, and no advisor has time to do it. But if a client does hours of level 1 work by themselves, even an hour of level 1 work, and brings their values, walks into the advisor's office with their values and says, these are my family values. Can we talk about these so that we can make sure this is reflected in the way that you're supporting me and the way that we're thinking about my estate and my legacy? An advisor should be prepared and willing to have that conversation, because now the client has done the work and it's the advisor's job to integrate. So in level 2, we think about it as helping advisors grow and getting more comfortable talking about this type of stuff. A lot of them grew up, understanding, I'm just going to use random words that I don't really know a ton about, like the Monte Carlo simulation and financial planning and all the stuff that they know way more about than we do. But we want to teach them about some of this legacy work so they're comfortable. Then we have what you alluded to at the start of this, which is level 3, which are the experts. This could be an external consultant, like our friend Jay Hughes. This could be an internal expert. Many large firms have internal, sometimes referred to as governance or dynamics experts, or some firms, larger firms, even have whole teams of resources that are like family centers for excellence, or a family center for well-being or something like that. These are the high level resources. And to us, it's a progression. If a client is willing to do work at level 1, then the advisor should be willing to engage at level 2. And if the client is really leaning into the advisor conversations, at some point, that's going to get to a point where the advisor says, man, this is a little bit more than I'm ready to do. The family just told me they want to build a multi-generational constitution. To us, that is a signal that the family is ready for level 3.
So it really is a progression. And I think what's important for advisors to understand is that the stuff that Total Family and some of the other facilitators make available to advisors is part of this larger ecosystem. It's not just this high-touch team that's ready to deploy to families that have tens or 20s or hundreds of millions of dollars that's over there somewhere to one side. This really can be integrated into the entire process of the advisor's practice. So with that in mind, and understanding that what we're talking about here is the Total Family as a vehicle for helping advisors work more effectively with clients, and in fact, facilitating a client-led experience at level 1 really feels like a scalable, very attractive additional value that the advisor can represent to their clients who are in that stage in life where this kind of work either starts to be meaningful or, as I believe, actually becomes emotionally essential for that family to continue its evolution at this higher stage of life because of the success they've had. So let's go back to that level 1. You talk about it as being client-led, and in another conversation, what you brought to light for me was how the work of the client-led part of this process actually supports these next upper levels, so that it's a place for the family to start, to learn the vocabulary, to understand the various components of it, to really begin to understand themselves. And that feeds into these other facilitated experiences, the second level run by the advisor, the third level run by these external experts. Dig in a little bit in terms of that level 1 client-led experience. What's the advisor introducing to the client? And as the client is leading, what is the client actually doing in that process in terms of the starting work of legacy?
Yeah, the advisor is, I think that the visionary advisors, which is the words we use to refer to them, they're kind of looking for signals as to which clients might be interested in this. And this could be a client that has brought up some of this stuff, like you alluded to. Maybe they're in a zone of disequilibrium because they just sold a business. Maybe they had a loss in the family. Their kids are launching. They're going through some type of transition. You can tell that the client is sort of dancing around some of these ideas. And I think advisors are just looking for those types of signals to say, hey, we have this partner, and I think you might be interested in some of the legacy work that they're doing. Would you be willing to, go through some exercises? And when an advisor enrolls them, our goal with the client is to give them baby steps along the way. And for us, the first step of doing legacy work actually is not about looking backwards, but about looking forwards. Looking forwards in a way of, we have a lot of decisions that we're going to be making here regarding our estate, regarding our inheritance, regarding what we want our life to look like following a transaction or going through this time, maybe these last 30 or 40 years of our life. And our answer to that is to let a client define their values, which is what's most important to them. Those are 5 words that they select. Their purpose, which is their North Star, and then their roles, the top areas of their life that are most important. And for us, the level 1 work, what we're really trying to do is build momentum. We have to let the clients take baby steps along the way so they can start to build momentum in this legacy work. Our deep-rooted belief about legacy work is that it's more valuable if you do a little bit over a long period of time. So if we can envision a world where maybe you're working with a 50-year-old client and you can get them to devote 1 hour a year to legacy, to thinking about their values, to thinking about their children, to being deliberate. If this person lives to be 80 years old, that will be 30 hours of legacy work, and that will put them in the 99.99 percentile of amount of legacy work that someone does. And it builds and compounds over time. So we're really in that level 1, just trying to build momentum and meet the clients where they are so they don't get intimidated and then not want to do anything.
Well, and that was one of the beautiful things about the process that I went through with the Total Family experience, that it was a manageable set of steps. But I think even more importantly than being manageable, my experience was it was incredibly meaningful. I am certainly past midlife. I'm in my 60s now. And so issues of legacy are starting to become much more emotionally central to me. My oldest daughter just had my first grandson, which was something I hadn't expected because my daughter was 40 when she had her first child. So it was fairly late in life. My father is still alive. He'll be 102 in a couple of months. And so for me at this stage of life, making sense of my journey, getting clear about my values, thinking a little bit about my roles. These are your buzzwords, but I think they're not just buzzwords. They're very descriptive of really important inner awarenesses that exist inside me. I mean, my values weren't something I created. They were something I discovered by going through the exercise that
Sure.
what Total Family offered. It was all something self-led. And I remember, logging in and getting started and then having a bunch of things come up and I had to get back to it. But I think the issue for me, as we try to discuss things on this podcast, the role of the behavioral sciences to help advisors be more effective with their clients. When you get a client at midlife, past midlife, who has achieved a high level of success, whose family is emerging out into the world, the kids are launching, to your point, where the marriage is evolving to its next level, where the marital couple is perhaps ascending into the seniority and the larger family. These issues of values and roles and what's the purpose of my life? What's the meaning of my life? What's the meaning I want to create going forward? These things start to become conscious issues for humans. And the fascination I've had about Total Family and what you're authoring here, Alex, is that I think this is a universal human experience, especially for people who've been financially successful. And there hasn't been an easy to access, sensible, emotionally accessible protocol that folks can follow for people to put some words on this and to start doing some work around this of self-awareness. And I think for an advisor to embrace this level one idea and then integrate that into their practice and make it available to their clients is going to be striking a vein of meaning inside those clients. Again, to your point, will every client resonate? No. Do I think most clients after a certain stage in life will, and at certain levels of success, from a psychological perspective, I think they will, actually. I think actually built in for them to want to do that. So at level one, you're really making this available for the advisor to leverage this natural inclination in humans with these fairly approachable, emotionally accessible exercises and experiences that create an enormous amount of meaning for the client. Again, my experience having gone through it and why I got so excited about this. So
Ken, if I was just to get use a concrete example, because you shared some stuff about your own journey, is if I was a visionary advisor and I was working with you, I might say, Ken, so you aren't just at midlife because your dad is still around at 102. So you actually have quite a ways to go if he's any signal for us. But you've also told me that your dad is from a different generation, a generation that maybe isn't as explicit to their children about what they're feeling or what they're experiencing or whatever, a little more insular. And what you have is an opportunity now with your new grandson that I would love for you on your grandson's birthday to take 20 minutes every year and just write him a brief note about some of the stuff you're thinking about, maybe some of the stuff you're thinking about with him. It doesn't have to be profound. It can be, I think these letters become time capsules in a lot of ways, where if you read, a letter from your great grandmother and she might have thought it wasn't interesting. She's like, it's just a normal day. I'm churning butter and you're like, what? She was churning butter? That's wild. So whatever you're saying might seem innocuous to you today, but to your grandson down the road, it might seem amazing, even if it's just a book you're reading or a movie or something that you're wishing for him or whatever. And if you do that for 20 minutes every single year, then you will have a version of legacy, a component of legacy that my guess would be tremendously valuable to him, because I don't know anyone who has something like that where their grandparent kind of sat down and deliberately thought about them in that way. And so that's an example to me of when we talk about integration, the advisor isn't doing the work. The advisor is simply suggesting the behavior. And maybe in my annual meeting with you, Ken, I'm like, hey, did you write your letter? And you're like, yeah, I did. I set a timer. And, and it's like, okay, wonderful, great. So that's the advisors just checking in on that behavior and integrating it versus actually having to go do it.
In the Advisor Institute, we talk about meeting clients at their point of need. And that little vignette you just played out, pretending that you were my advisor and offering me one simple exercise that enriches my connection with my grandson in a way that I would not have thought of myself necessarily. Though now that you've mentioned it to me, and maybe even your software even provides me a little guidance on how to get started and how to make this work in a very thoughtful way.
We do.
You've thought ahead for me. I'm just sitting here thinking about, if advisors are listening to me and listening to our conversation, are you imagining right now what it'd be like to have that conversation with 10 or 12 or 15 clients, just suggesting one little thing, and maybe as a way of suggesting there's a whole world of possible resources inside this client-led experience? You're meeting them at their point of need. You're also elevating your relationship structure with them in terms of the stuff that's the deepest, most important aspects of their life. I can't think of anything that would build a stronger bond between an advisor and a client than to be doing this kind of work. And that conversation you and I just had was what, 4 or 5 minutes? You suggested an idea, you illustrated how it could be done, you suggested what the results might be.
Well, let's go a little deeper in level 2 for a second, because maybe you come back and you say, Alex, I sat down to write him. I don't know what to write. I have no idea. And so at that point, to your point about empowering these advisors, we want to give them resources and ideas. And advisors are going to figure out how to do this in their own way, right? And firms are developing their own proprietary resources. But let me give you a few questions that I might come back and say these are examples of starter questions for legacy letters. And we want to start, if you think about it, in degree of difficulty, right? Your first legacy letter should not be, the hardest thing you ever composed in your entire life. You want to, again, just like you wouldn't go to the gym and lift the biggest weight you can find, you do some type of warm up. So here's an example of some warm up questions, and maybe you tell me which one you think would be the easiest for you to write. Ken, what failure or setback taught you a lesson that you were grateful for? Besides family, what do you view as your greatest accomplishment? What's the best advice someone ever gave you? What's the most important thing you ever learned about being a good friend? These are 4 very accessible kind of starting points. Is there one of those prompts that you think would be easier for you to write about at a first letter standpoint?
I'm absolutely vibrating with a recollection of a very significant failure in years that I turned into an absolute engine of success. And I could write about that so that a 6-year-old would get the message. But importantly, I'm just imagining then once a year, twice a year, maybe regularly, creating these time capsules of love and regard and connection and history. What I'm starting to experience right now is myself as a person who's many, many, many years older than my grandson, Rowan. But going forward in life, those pieces would all link together, and I would be an even more real, powerful resource for him. And again, since we're sharing these kind of stories, I'm recalling my mother's father taking me fishing when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old and showing me how to tie a very particular knot to hold the hook on the string or the line of the fishing rod, a knot that I to this day continue to use and will teach my grandson, Rowan. That little piece of my grandfather's skill and knowledge passed down to me matters enormously and connects me to that person. So I'm sitting here now in these few brief minutes of our conversation, starting to see the connections in my own life back in time and how these people formed me in some ways. But I'm also starting to see a vision of how I could participate at a deeper, more profound level in forming Roland's experience of himself and connection to the resource that I represent. What a wonderful illustration, Alex, of this level one facility that Total Family provides to advisors, that in just a few minutes, you've enriched a vision of what it would be like to support an advisor at their most significant emotional point of need as they reach this level of their life and have this level of complexity in their life.
Let me give you one more thing because it's important here. I don't know if it's like a law or a rule. It's called I think it's the Law of Diminishing Intent. Have you ever heard of this?
I've heard something of that nature, but we'll pull it apart for us.
Okay. It's basically like, you get that you're driving in the car and you get the feeling you're like, I need to call my aunt. I owe her a phone call. At that exact moment, that is the time, the highest likelihood of time that you are going to call your aunt. And every moment that passes beyond that time, it decreases because life gets in the way and things, and you're not in the headspace anymore. And so my last piece would be to you as your fake advisor for this podcast is, if you're thinking about the fishing knot, the time to write it down is right after we get off this podcast, because every second that passes beyond that, it'll seem less important to you, but it's not less important. And so at level one, you want to make our software accessible to families. So in that moment at 3 a.m., when they want to write that story about the thing that changed their life and they have the energy to do it, they can just go do it. And then it's there forever.
So every advisor wants to be more significant to the clients that are most significant in their business. Every advisor wants to find ways of being relevant. Every advisor wants to find ways of standing out. I use the term in some of my lectures to become that character of significance in the narrative of the client's life. Some people the client is relating to are of great significance because of the way they relate to the client, and others are of less significance. In this brief conversation, Alex, I think what you revealed is there's an opportunity for an advisor who is a visionary advisor who sees the value of connecting with their best, most successful clients at a deeper, more profound level, has a tool that they can embrace and drive into their business as a resource that enriches the nature of relationships and equips the advisor to help the client navigate some of these important issues, and all at scale. And I think that was the thing that you really have distinguished here. There's this level one that's client-led, but the advisor kind of holds the client and encourages the client. There's level two where the advisor can actually take on more active roles in facilitating that. And I think in our next podcast, we should talk a little bit about things like family meetings and some of the ways that advisors can be an active participant in this process. And then, of course, in the larger ecosystem, for those cases that really need the bespoke, high-touch, high-technical, extensive consulting, there are these teams, there are these independent resources that advisors can bring into their practice. And I think what we've established here is a vision for advisors to begin thinking about how to integrate this into their business. And if I could, as I'm wrapping up our brief conversation today, Alex, let me suggest that there's this law of diminishing intention that right now I'm guessing there's a lot of folks listening to me that are pretty excited about this. If they wanted to strike while this iron is hot and take an action to add this dimension to their practice, how would they do that? How do they get in touch with you, Alex?
Yeah, you can go to totalfamily.io and click sign up as a partner. We have advisor licenses, so any advisor can go on there, buy a license. We have a new AB promo code that we can put into the show notes here. I think it's AB Family 20, but I'll double check that. Yeah, I mean, I would say that, we talked about this before, but this trend isn't going away. It's not very likely that in 6 months an advisor is going to realize, oh, you know what? I don't think legacy matters to my clients. Or now I realize after some reflection that family is not super important to my clients. So to us, it's about taking that first step and really just starting your journey as a visionary advisor, because it is a learning curve. There is some growth that is going to be involved in an advisor getting comfortable with these conversations. But then there's also an element of creativity that's going to come from it. And deepens relationships like you're talking about. So like, you're just to stick on you for one last example. By the way, that promo code is ABFamily20 if you go to sign up, and you get 20% off if you're an advisor. But you have this fishing knot, and I don't know what the knot looks like, but you know how to tie it. Your grandfather taught you how to tie it. That knot could be a symbol, right? It could be a symbol. Maybe it's a graphic that you have made up that becomes a symbol for you and your grandson. It could become a symbol for your family. You could take the knot and have a piece, something made that has that knot around it as a symbol. And what I think these types of things do is give you insight into the type of culture that people are trying to create. And every great culture has symbols, right? And it doesn't have to be, that knot could mean absolutely nothing to me, and it could mean absolutely everything to your family. And I think these types of conversations gives advisors the ability to connect with their clients on a very, very human, deep, impactful level. And the chances of them losing a client after they've just gotten that client to write 40 legacy letters over the course of multiple decades, to me, is very, very small.
Well, you've just put your finger on it in a couple of ways, Alex. You've created a vision for us of how this legacy work can fit into the advisor's practice. You've revealed how totalfamily.io is a resource that advisors can integrate. But the most important thing you did in this podcast, as far as I'm concerned, is you revealed the spirit that has informed the construction of Total Family. And you revealed it by grabbing a hold of this idea of the fishing knot that actually brings tears to my eyes to think about the connection between my grandfather and my grandson.
Yeah.
And suggests to us that we could actually use that knot as a symbol that might have a shared meaning down through the years of Rowan's life as he grows up and needs resources to draw upon in his life to cope with the various challenges of his life. You revealed how you are thinking about this. And that spirit comes through in the exercises that are in the software. It comes through in the way you interpret all of it. It comes through in the way you're equipping advisors. And I can think of no better place to end than to suggest that for those advisors who are inspired by this story and our conversation, totalfamily.io, a partner of AllianceBernstein Advisor Institute, and a conversation that we are going to continue over several more podcasts and really explore what legacy actually means for a visionary advisor. Thanks for spending the time today, Alex. Thank you for taking the time with me. Look forward to continuing the conversations.